Live, well, you can see we're at the shop of Bob Bell and Robbie Bell, the Precision Concepts headquarters, and check this bike is the winning bike in the Baja 1000. Great job, Robbie.
Yeah, thanks. I still get a little emotional thinking about it. Just it's been a long road, lots of ups and downs throughout my career in Baja, and to have tried for nearly half a decade to try to get the win on the Kawasaki and to finally achieve it, it's really a dream come true. It's kind of completed my career in Baja for sure.
Well, I hear a little rumor that this be the end of racing in Baja for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely for me. This year was my last year racing in the pro class. Baja's done so much for me, but it's also a risky proposition racing down there, and I've had plenty of ups, but also quite a few downs, and some hard crashes, and so I've thought long and hard about it, and I don't want to take the risks anymore, and it's given me so much, and to kind of end this year on such a high, it kind of, like I said, it completes it for me. I've achieved everything I could have ever hoped for in Baja, and I kind of want to do more of a team management role and help in the pits, and moving forward kind of help the guys that are coming up, Ricky Braybeck and Max Eddy, and hopefully help them defend the 1X, because they put in a ton of work this year to earn it.
Well, let's ask you another question. Have you been approached by anybody maybe to drive a four-wheel vehicle?
I haven't been approached yet, so if anybody is curious, I'm available. But no, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to racing in a truck. It'd be fun, but I definitely have a passion for the bikes. It's something that I really enjoy doing, and I'm sure it's definitely not my last time in Baja. I love racing down there, and I'll definitely be back in the vet class, or just to have fun and enjoy the experience, because it's something that once it gets into your system, you're addicted, you're hooked, and I don't think I could ever not go back. I enjoy it too much. The adventure, the people, the lifestyle, it's hard to give up. So I'll definitely be back down there having fun.
Well, if you look at some of the greats in the four wheels that have transferred from motorcycles to Larry Rossler, Jack Johnson, I mean, the list goes on. There's some great people that, it's all about reading the desert, I think, because you learned how to read the desert, and that's something that a lot of people don't know, but once you do, it really helps what you do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is beneficial if you come from like a dirt bike or a quad background into a truck. As long as you have the talent to drive the truck well, you do have maybe more of appreciation for one, the vulnerability of your equipment, and two, the vulnerability of pushing the limits too far. Just because on a bike there's more at stake. There's more physical harm that can happen if something does go wrong. So you have that in the back of your head when you transfer that to a truck. So there's definitely some guys that have really made that work, and I do see that as a potential benefit coming from a dirt bike background.
Well, let's go ahead. Robbie, let's go back a few years and trace back to when you first started with Honda, 2005, and then follow up with what took place after that.
Yeah, 2005 was my first year racing off-road and racing Baja, and I learned a lot. I had a few crashes and just learned a lot about what it takes to race in Baja. And so moving forward into 2006, I was teaming with Kendall Norman at the time, and we won the San Felipe 250 and the Baja 500. And so going into the 1000, we were both, super confident. We're like, okay, we want to win the 1X. We want to go out with a statement and win the 1000. And Johnny Campbell teamed with us. So it was a three-man team, and we were going up against the reigning 1X of Steve Hengeveld, Mikey Childress, and Quinn Cody. They were, it's kind of like the inner team, A-team, B-team rivalry. And I definitely learned a lot that year at that 1000, because I crashed really hard off the start, and it ended up costing us the win in the race. We were still able to win the championship by finishing second at the 06 1000, but it was heartbreaking for me because Johnny at the time had a streak of, I think it was like 10 1000 victories in a row. So it snapped that streak for him, and then just for me personally, I really wanted to get the win. I felt I knew that I could get it, but it just showed I still wasn't mature enough, and Baja requires a certain level of maturity. So coming back in 2000, I think 2000 was probably the best year I've ever had in Baja. That was a year, I believe they had to race the Baja 250, starting and stopping in Ensenada. And so Kendall and I were able to win that. And then again, we backed it up with the 500 with Steve Hengeveld, and then the 1000, it was the 40th anniversary for SCORE, and it was from Ensenada all the way down to Cabo San Lucas, one of the longest 1000s in history. And that was one of the first years KTM made a big push with their 690 or
690, yeah. I was down there with them. It was kind of crazy. And right behind us, just to kind of elaborate, is that the 40th annual trophy?
That's the 40th
right there.
annual championship trophy. The Big Eagle in the background, but that was probably the best race of my career, at least one that I look back on very fondly, because I started and had a great run. Kendall had a great run. Johnny, to have Johnny and Steve both on the team, it was kind of like the best, at the time, the best four guys in Baja. And so it was like the dream team. All of us had a perfect, clean run, and we were able to win it, and we beat the trucks as well on time. So that was just a great memory for me. And then coming back in '08, I was able to three-peat as far as the championship and get my second Baja 1000 victory with Honda. So I definitely had a great run with Honda.
Well, let's start. Okay, so you got 2006, 7, and 8, and then here comes '09. So you move on to a different team. Talk about that.
Yeah, at the end of '08, Honda and it had become kind of JCR Racing at the time, and we parted ways. And there weren't the fondest feelings at the time, and so I was fired up to come back for the 1000 and try to win. And we came really close. I think it was the first time in history that a bike has finished physically first but not won the race, and we ended up losing by about 2 minutes. And I had a pretty bad crash halfway through the race that I feel cost us our chance. And so that was one that was just heartbreaking and super disappointing, but two, it also kind of lit a fire under me to go back and try to win it again. It almost became like a destiny to go back down and win it on the Cowie. And I want to touch on, there's definitely no ill feelings at all towards JCR or Honda anymore. Where I'm very appreciative of everything Johnny did for me. He basically brought me out of nowhere to give me the career that I have. And so, everything happens for a reason, I think. And I mean, with the way everything has turned out this year, I definitely believe in that more than I ever have.
Yeah, I was there that day when I know it was pretty upsetting. You guys rode a great race. I mean, incredible race. And I remember Kendall coming around the corner and just, I mean, it's amazing you can race that long of a race and lose by a matter of seconds or minutes, but you guys put one hell of a race. Now, so that kind of inspired you to go on and you got to get this win in your belt, It's kind of like something you want to walk away with racing history,
Yeah, I didn't race in 2010 because we were kind of searching for somebody to kind of back the team, and that's when THR Motorsports got behind us in 2011. And so that was the next year we tried. And again, we came really close, but came up a few minutes short. And then 2012, we were really, really close again. But then we had a little bike mechanical, like a couple hundred miles from the finish or 150 miles from the finish that cost us the win. And then last year, I mean, we all know how bad that went. And for me personally as well, I had a really, really bad crash, probably one of my worst in Baja. And at that point, I was feeling like I was done racing in Baja. I didn't want to go back after everything that happened to me and then everything that we had lost, especially with the loss of Kurt. I didn't want to go back down there anymore. I didn't want to take the risks, the chances, being up front and pushing the pace like we were pushing. But then the more I thought about it, the more I started thinking about how I wanted to remember Baja and how much it had given me and how much I do enjoy going down there. And I wanted to go down one more time in the pro class and put in a ride that I knew would get me safely to the finish, that I knew would help me enjoy the race. And then plus there was definitely the very good chance that we could win the race and win the 1X plate for Ricky and Max. And so I decided to commit to the team, and I still, like I said earlier, I still can't really describe how amazing it is to have gone through as much as I have and to kind of end it the way we ended it, to be able to get the win and to have such an amazing ride, to actually go through so much adversity like we did with a couple little mechanical issues and each guy just keep the bike moving forward and having amazing rides. It's really kind of completed the Baja story for me.
Well, it kind of goes back to, like you said, the year before, having some problems, but and with the Kurt and trying to put it all together. And then I know in your head, you're very close to Kurt, and all you guys that race in that pro class think about that when you're down there. And it really has probably played a lot with all you guys down there the last couple of years.
Definitely, it's been a huge emotional punch into the stomach, just because, I mean, there are a lot of people that knew Kurt a lot better than me, and so as much as it hurt me and hit home with me, I can't imagine what they were going through and continue to deal with. So, but it's something that we all think about. I mean, Kurt's memorial is up at the spot where his accident happened, And you know, I stopped at his memorial and just kind of sat there for a while and kind of sat with him and, you know, soaked in emotionally what had happened and tried to make as much pieces with it as I could. You know, I asked him when I was sitting there with him to, you know, to watch over everybody who was racing, and I think he was. You know, I don't think, at least I heard anyway, there weren't too many bad accidents. Everybody, you know, got home safe. So that's the main thing for me, was just wanting everybody to get home safe and enjoy the adventure, because that's why we all go down. You know, we love the risks. It's fun to hang it out, but at the end of the day, you know, you want to make it back home to your friends and family. That's what it's all about.
You know, I agree with you, because, you know, the Kurt Caselli Foundation and all that is about the safety and everything. So it's like he's up above watching as this takes care of everybody, you know, kind of work with everybody and make it a lot safer. Now, in this race, let's talk about this race, because you started out at the first of the year. You guys won San Felipe. You know, you walked away, great victory. So you're on a roll. So you show up in Imperial, and due to something, you know, little issues, you guys walked away. You won, but then you walked away in second place. So, you know, you came back the 500, you win the 500. So you're on a move, you know, and then come back at the Desert Challenge, and you guys walk away from there tied in the points. So talk about coming into the 1,000, how cool it was. I mean, you know what you had to do. It's like a drag race, you know, from Ensenada to La Paz. Whoever gets there first is the winner. So talk about that whole day. I know you guys were out front, then second, and then out front. You know, it was incredible. People watching at home, tracking you guys. It was incredible down the peninsula.
It's definitely been an incredible year for everybody involved in the team, especially Ricky Brabec and Max Eddy. They've had a stellar year. They're riding the best they've ever ridden in their lives, and I'm so happy for them. And like you said, they won San Felipe and the Baja 500, which is huge. And then, you know, like you said, we weren't able to win the American-based score races, but it made for a great story, you know, a great script coming into the 1,000. It was eerily similar to 2012 when it was kind of winner-take-all situation, and to be honest, as the race unfolded, it was kind of scary how similar it ended up feeling. But like you said, it was definitely, we were up against it during the race. Colton, I have to give the utmost respect to Colton and what he did down there. He raced like 600 plus miles straight, over 12 hours on the bike, and he led the Baja 1000. It wasn't just, oh, he rode that long. He also rode it fast. And he pulled time, you know, he pulled away from me off the start. I just didn't want to go as fast as he was willing to go. And so we had lost time early. But then I never got nervous about that. I felt like we were going to peak during the night. I felt like our night riders were going to be, you know, stronger than their night riders. And so as the night started to fall, we started closing in time. Max was on the bike, and he started inching back up on the 1X bike. And then for a couple minutes, we had actually passed them in the pits, and Max had taken the physical lead back for us. And about that time, I was thinking, all right, it's going to plan. Everything's working well. And then we hear over the radio, over Weatherman. Weatherman comes over the radio saying 4X has a broken, and then it gets all garbled. And we don't hear what he said. So we're like thinking, oh crap, is it a broken, is the rider broken? Is the bike broken? What's going on? And so we're freaking out, thinking about, okay, how can we chase to where we think he is? And then all of a sudden Max comes over the bike and says, hey, I have a shredded rear tire. I'm changing it. I'll be going in 10 minutes. And so we're like, okay, you know, we're still in the race. Max is on it. And he actually ended up having to change the tire. He limped the bike into the Baja pit, and it ended up having to change the tire with like a blown out Desert AT that they had laying around with a couple screwdrivers, and got going. But that's just one of those things that Baja requires. You know, it requires you to just keep the bike moving forward, and Max did a heck of a job to keep the bike moving forward. So about that point, we were like 20 minutes down, but we're still thinking, okay, we're still well within this race. There's like 700 miles to go, or 500 miles to go at that point, something like that, like plenty of time left. So Ricky gets on the bike, and not long into his section, we have a little issue with the headlight. We think one of the batteries went bad. And so Ricky only had one light, and luckily he had put a radio in his fanny pack. So he radioed just on blind hope that somebody was still close, and Max's chase van was still in San Ignacio at a gas station getting gas. So Ricky rides out, meets them, they replace the lights, get him going. And I mean, just another story of,
wow,
preparation and just thinking of everything you can to try to keep the bike, you know, moving forward and be prepared for anything. So so at that point we were like 40 to 45 minutes down, and now I'm starting to feel a little bit down about the race, a little discouraged, but at the same time there was still like 450 miles left, so there's still anything can happen. And that's when we got thrown a lifeline when, unfortunately for the 1X team, Ian Young crashed and broke his wrist. But there's no denying his heart for the race and for winning, because he was able to keep their bike moving forward and keep the physical lead over us. And so right around the 300 miles to go, we come in for our last major maintenance on the bike. So the bike's good to go to the finish. Steve Hengeveld gets on. We're about 30 minutes behind the 1X team. And for me, a 30-minute deficit never seemed so small, because Steve is one of the baddest dudes at night in Baja. He's incredible. I mean, he's incredible at any time, but especially from Loreto to La Paz, under the cover of darkness, Steve, I think, is the fastest racer probably ever in Baja. And I know Honda had some issues. I think they had some light issues, but still, Steve made up that entire 30-minute gap, passed the 1X bike, and then pulled away like 20 minutes to the finish. And it's still, I'm so stoked for Steve, because he was in the similar situation in 2012 where he saw the headlights of the 1X bike, only to have a mechanical that, you know, ended our race for us. And so this year for him to see the headlights and be able to pass them and then pull away like he did, I know it meant the world to him. It means the world to me, and especially everybody on the team. It's just huge. It's been such an emotional roller coaster, and to pull it off, it's incredible.
You know, listening to you, it's a great story, and I'm glad we can share it on Dirt Live. I mean, like I said, your dad has been such an inspiration to you, helping you throughout your career, and, you know, with his crew and all the people. You got a great group of people behind you.
Oh, absolutely. I've had some relationships with some amazing people. I mean, especially everybody now, from, you know, all the amazing sponsors that we have, the mechanics, like you said, my dad, you know, kind of being our race coordinator, putting the whole program together. But dating back, I mean, a lot of what I've learned too has come from Johnny Campbell, and especially Bruce Ogilvie. Bruce was probably one of the biggest influences in my life, as far as my Baja career, I should say, and as well as my dad's. I think he had a knack for race preparation and developing a race plan, and he also had kind of this quiet confidence about him that just was infectious. You know, he was a man of few words, but you could tell what he demanded of you. You know, you could feel it. You knew what he required. He required perfection, and he required you to be tough and to just keep the bike moving forward, doing whatever it takes to keep the bike moving down the peninsula. And he instilled that into all of us. And you know, there's still not a day that goes by that I don't think about him and everything that he's done for me, for my career, and the impact that he's had on us.
And you can see in the picture right up here, a picture of him racing back when riding the 650, and definitely one of the bad dudes in Baja. But, you know, he was in the helicopter a lot for you when you, 2006 and 7, so pretty inspirational with him up above and giving you some things to go on. I bet he was very helpful.
Well, it's just having him above me. It was comforting, because I knew, you know, one, just to have the support in the air, but two, being him, it kind of helped me relax, and it gave me that confidence that he had to ride the way Baja requires, Baja demands. And the older I got, or, you know, the more experienced I got in Baja, the more I realized what that meant. And Bruce is definitely one of the key factors, or one of the key people in my life that helped me understand what that meant, understand what it took to race in Baja. And I think honestly, after he passed, I kind of maybe forgot a little bit about that. When I moved to Cowie, I was riding more on emotion, just trying to get the win and trying to almost prove a point. And so after having the few years that I've had, I kind of went back to square one this year, with going back to the basics. And the basics are keeping the bike in perfect condition, so your teammates have a perfect bike, and giving them the best chance to have the best ride they can. And so that was my main goal, and that was the biggest thing that Bruce instilled with us. He wanted us to go fast and overcome adversity, but mainly, you know, the most important factor is keeping the bike in perfect condition for your teammates down the peninsula.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I mean, that is, you know, my years of racing back in the days, that was to find the people that can be with you, to race with you. They can all be fast. They can be the fastest guys in the world, but they have to bring that bike right here back to you, you know, in a piece that you can move on and win. It's really tough, but you've learned how to do it. You know, you won 3 championships, 2006, 2008. And then this year, you got another one. So it's an incredible finish for you. I mean, I know you're not done. You know, somebody will be calling you going, hey, let's jump on an over 30 team and a ride. And then you're not under so much pressure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of pressure under the big team here.
Yeah, there's pressure being on a big team, but more so, I think the pressure comes from being one of the first bikes, because the first bike is the one that wakes up the course, basically. And, you know, whether it's spectators or livestock, you know, the first bike is their first clue as to the fact that the race is coming. And so it's more likely to have spectators on course, you know, driving out to where they're going to take pictures or where they're going to watch the race from, more likely to have, you know, livestock on the course. And so I think that's where the pressure comes. And for me, that's the risk. That's where the risk is, and that's where I'm happy that, you know, I'm happy to kind of step back from that risk and not feel like I have to push the pace, being the first bike on the course. But having said that, there have been some great measures taken, both internally with the teams, but then also from the KC66, the Caselli Foundation.
Yeah.
Having the extra helicopter down there, the extra aerial support, it has taken steps to make it a lot safer racing in Baja at the highest level.
Well, Robbie, I want to thank you for joining us on Dirt Live, sharing a lot of neat stories and your history. And we hopefully you come back, hang out with us. So thank you very much. Robbie Bell right here, folks. #1 this year, 2014. We're going to go to commercial. Dirt Live, we're out here in Las Vegas with Rob McEachern. You can see here on my right at Team Ford. Pretty cool place for you to hang out, right, Rob? This is kind of where you, you know, started out a little bit in Vegas, you know?
No, absolutely. You know, Steve Ollick has been a good friend of mine for almost 30 years now, from back when he was with Friendly Ford with his dad, and then when they opened up Team Ford, you know, it's an awesome place to be, and you know, I've definitely purchased a few Ford vehicles from him.
Well, you know, you guys go back a lot of years, the Rough Riders, and now with this new truck that you guys are running this weekend out here in Vegas, has that color of the Rough Riders.
Yeah, you know, it was neat. You know, Steve, you know, prior to the last race, the Blue Water Desert Challenge, you know, he gave me a text and said, hey, what do you think about running the Rough Rider colors? I said, awesome, you know, let's bring it back out. It's been a big hit. You know, a lot of the people, once they saw the truck and after the race, you know, a ton of people gave me texts and shout outs for, you know, enjoying the paint scheme and having it back again.
Now, coming off your big win, I mean, have you been able to relax after that?
Not really. You know, we stayed in La Paz for a couple days and then enjoyed the food and the ocean. We went out swimming with whale sharks for a few hours. You know, we had a good time down there, but you know, we had to get back. You know, the off season is short. You know, we got racing. You know, in December still. I have you know, been doing some practicing for King of the Hammers. Going to do that with Larry McRae, Poison Spider. We got, you know, San Felipe's coming. It's right around the corner at the end of January. So no, it's been a lot of work. You know, the racing thing for me, it's a business. You know, full time, and with short course and the trophy truck, it really keeps us busy and a lot of work to do.
Well, we talked to you at the finish. We showed that a couple weeks ago. We showed the awards last week. But I'm sure some other interesting stuff. I mean, you picked up at the last, you know, few weeks before the race, Jason Voss. That was a great pick.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Andy and I ran together in the 2013 Baja 1000 in my truck, and you know, we ended up coming home second. And you know, both of us, you know, we were kind of bummed about that. We went, you know, to go win that race. We both did our homework. We had a great plan. You know, Andy had a flat. You know, in his section, he did the middle section there, and he had a flat, and it took him a long time. Just the jacking system wasn't perfect, and it took about 10 minutes to change that tire. We lost track position to BJ. We ended up catching back up to him, but I couldn't get by him to the finish, and you know, we ended up coming in second. So you know, after that race, you know, Andy and I, we wanted to come back and try to get it done this year at the 1000. And with the hurricane that happened, you know, we were looking at, you know, all the reports and how bad it was down in Baja, and you know, our plan was that I'd drive the middle, or Andy would drive the middle, and then I'd do the finish. But with the hurricane happening, you know, we heard all the rumors about how bad the race course was, how bad the highways were. And before we'd gone down there, you know, I woke up early one morning and about 3-4 weeks before the race, and I thought to myself, you know, wouldn't it be nice to have a third driver? And I texted Andy and said, what do you think about that? He said, I was thinking the same thing, but I don't know who. It just so happened later that day I was talking to Kevin Croyer, who builds our engines, and I said, to him, he was asking a little bit of our strategy and what we were going to do, and I was saying to him, we're kind of thinking about 3 drivers, and he said, why don't you call Jason and give him a shot? I said, he's already driving with somebody, and he says, no, he's not. He hasn't committed to anyone. And I said, absolutely, he's such a talent. He's had a great year so far in racing, and I got the phone number for him and gave him a call, and within 24 hours he made a commitment to race with us at the 1,000. And really, they called it the dream team, and the strategy for us changed a bunch then. Having 3 drivers that are all capable of winning the race on their own, putting them all on one team, the pressure really got put on the guys in the truck, making sure that we didn't drive the truck into the ground, and the guys prepped it as good as they can to make sure that it would survive 3 drivers like Andy, Jason, and myself.
Like you said, 3 guys that all run Croyer Motors, 3 guys that run for BF Goodrich. And was it tough? You have 3 separate teams. You have big teams. Your group, you got Jason's group with his dad and everybody, and then Andy with the McMillans. It kind of all worked together, huh?
Absolutely. And really the plan was with Andy, it's just, Andy, I just want you to bring your pre-running, get your pre-running down there and bring a little bit of support, a chase truck. And, he did that. He handled the section and was down there for pre-running for 7 or 8 days. And same with Jason. He just handled his pre-running and the chase trucks down there at the end. He brought a great group of people. Jason brought about 12 guys and 3 chase trucks, and Andy brought a chase truck and 3 guys, and then I had my guys, that we had about 5 chase trucks. We used the Baja Fools for 3 of our pits, and a few other outside, Jamie Campbell with Raceco in pit 1, and then we had a local guy, Daryl Putman, who's the tech director there at Best of the Desert. We used him for another pit, and it just really came together. We had over 100 people at the race, and I didn't realize that we had that until Monday, the week of the race. I realized, started counting, thinking all the people, and realized we had over 100 people at this race to make this happen. And it's the Baja 1000 Peninsula Run is really, really a lot of work, figuring out the logistics and strategy, which Andy helped out a lot on, as well as Jason, figuring out the whole strategy and the pit locations and stuff like that. But it was a full 2 months of figuring that out and figuring out all the people and the planning of all that.
Well, you have trouble, like in 2012, you had to finish in the top 12 to win the championship. And then it's like Frank asked you a question, which was pretty cool at the media center. You've won the 2 longest races in score, the one to Cabo, and then that one, which was 1,280 miles. So, I mean, it's got to be a feat in itself.
Yeah, it is. The same thing in 2007 when we won with Mark Post in the Riviera truck. We brought in Carl Renezetter to drive 300 miles of that race, and it really paid off big dividends. I had started the race, drove about 350 miles. Carl Renezetter got in, drove 300 miles. I got back in, drove another 400 miles, and then Mark Post, he got in to take it to the finish in Cabo. The sun was up. He went to sleep, slept through the night, got up, and he was wide awake, fresh, ready to go. And that's really in 2014 with Jason, the same thing happened. I started, went to mile 472. Andy drove to North Loretto, mile 923, and then Jason and his crew were there. Jason got in at 4:45 in the morning. He slept in Loretto, got a good night's sleep, and woke up, and he was fresh, ready to go. And pretty much, the strategy before the race with Andy and I, when we had joined with Jason, was my job was really just to take care of the truck and keep it within 5 or 10 minutes of the lead, and then Andy would take it from there. And if he was close to the lead, same thing, basically just transport the truck down to Jason. And if we weren't leading, we had a fresh 3rd driver to go out there and get the job done. And we figured, there's no one that's going to be able to keep up with the fresh driver, especially Jason. And that's what happened when Jason got in. The 40 miles the first 40 miles that he went to Loretto, we were doing time splits every 10 miles, and he was putting a minute every 10 miles on Robbie and Luke, who were the next 2 trucks behind us at that time. And right then I knew, this is perfect. Just the truck has to stay together, and it did. And Robbie lost a ring and pinion in that section, and then Luke McMillan, had a problem, I believe, with electronics with the water up near San Javier. And when Jason got to the other side out at Insurgentes, he was 25 minutes in the lead. We relayed that information to him, and he pretty much just had to cruise it to the finish.
Wow, incredible. And I know for you, just an incredible victory. Even though you don't win the championship, it's still to win the 1,000, is that bigger than the championship, you think?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, obviously, we all remember who wins the Baja 1000. I don't think that we all remember who wins the championship, but you know, in my whole career, championships have always been important, and that's one of the things I pride myself on, is winning a championship. So we definitely wanted to win that. Really in the last 6 years or so, 5, 6 years, I've had 3 of the Score championships slip through my fingers. You know, going into them or getting close to them and having them fall apart. But you know, I think the pace, something that contributes to that a lot these days, is the pace. You have to run so hard with these trophy trucks, the reliability of the engines, the transmissions, the shocks, and you know, if your team is putting the truck together and maintaining it to its utmost capabilities, you can really drive the heck out of these trucks today. And I think that contributes to the difficulties of being consistent throughout the season to win the championship. You can't cruise anymore. You got to go right from the beginning.
Now you're over with the year for right now, but you got a race this weekend with, you know, Steve Olagus. Then there's not a lot of time between the end of the year, Christmas. You got to spend a little time with the family.
Yeah.
And then get ready for San Felipe. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, for me, you know, racing the Pro 2 and the Pro 4 in the Lucas Oil Series, and racing with Steve Olagus in Best in the Desert, racing my own truck in the Score Series. And then the other things that we have to do, I'm adding King of the Hammers this next year, which will actually be Friday right before Parker.
Yeah.
I've been out testing in December already with that. We're going to do that again this coming week and weekend. It's a lot of work, and I enjoy it. It's what I love doing, but it's never ending. Racing for me is 365 days, 24/7. It's my hobby, it's my job, it's my career, it's everything that I do. There's no getting away from it, and it's a lot of work, but I enjoy it. You know, like I said.
You know, it's pretty cool. You don't have to get up in the morning and put a tie on and go to work, and you just get in your car, go down, and today maybe testing this vehicle, tomorrow that vehicle. How did the test go at King of the Hammer?
It was real good. You know, in 2010 was my first opportunity to do King of the Hammer, and you know, I had Larry McRae ride with me, and he's a guy that's done a lot of rock crawling, and they figured, you know, we need to get somebody to go with Rob to, you know, explain to him, you know, how to rock crawl and how to do it, and the lines. And I can tell you, my analogy of it is, if you would have told me to get in that rock crawler and go through that canyon and we'll meet you on the other side, if I was by myself, I would have went up that canyon, came back, drove all the way around the mountain to the other side and told them it's not passable. There's no way. It's changed now. But with Larry's help, you know, he basically showed me, no, it is passable, and this is the way we go, which is incredible. It's mind-blowing to me. But, you know, we did testing for 2 days. We brought the guys out from Fox. We tried the new tire from BF Goodrich, the KR2. We tried that on the rock crawler and had a lot of success. And you know, I'm super excited about doing that again. Another analogy I have about King of the Hammers rock crawling is, you know, in desert racing, hundreds of things happen every minute or every mile. In rock crawling, millions of things happen. You're going a mile an hour or 5 miles an hour crawling through the rocks, but there's so many things that you have to see, and you have to, you know, look at all the rocks and make a plan of how you're going to get on them, and use each rock and each tire to get you the other tire to another rock that gives you the traction to get up the mountain or up the rock crawl. It's an incredible thing, and you know, I tell when I'm out there doing it, I'd like to bring other guys, other trophy truck drivers, other off-road race people, and say, you know, you got to come here and check this out. This is incredible, and it's an amazing thing what these rock crawlers do.
Now, are you driving somebody else's rock crawler?
Yeah, I'm driving Larry McRae, owner of Poison Spider. You know, he's battling cancer right now, and you know, that enabled me to have the opportunity to run his vehicle and compete in the KOH. You know, with him riding with me, he witnessed, you know, what I was doing, and you know, I guess I'm one of the few people that he would allow to race his rock crawlers. So I'm super honored to do that for him and Poison Spider and the whole company while he's battling cancer. You know, we hope the best for him and get him back out there. But you know, with doing his chemo and all the treatments that he's doing now, he won't be strong enough to do battle at King of the Hammer. So you know, we brought myself and another guy that's a well-known BF Goodrich ambassador, Lance Clifford.
Yeah,
will be riding with me. He's ridden with Robbie Gordon there. He's ridden with Jason Shear, and he's done stuff on his own. So Lance is my guy that'll tell me, yes, you really got to do that, and this is how you do it. But I'll be the guy behind the wheel.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, last time I was there, he was with Robbie Gordon. He's also co-drove with Roger Norman.
Yeah.
I mean, so definitely a great guy, knows what he's doing, and very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the 2 days we did tests, and Lance helped me out a lot. And you know, talking to Larry today, almost every day, talking to Larry McRae about it, and just brainstorming. I want to finish. A trophy truck driver has not finished, according to Lance Clifford, he has not finished the King of the Hammer yet. So I'd really like to be the first one. And we're racing a rock crawler that Poison Spider has supplied a lot of the parts on it. It's not a full-on outright race vehicle, but it's a lot of parts that you can buy from Poison Spider right off the shelf. So Larry prides himself on that and proving that his products and equipment can conquer the King of the Hammer. So we definitely want to finish that race, and hopefully we can get in the top 10. I'd be really happy with top 10.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of trophy truck drivers. TJ's come out, Robbie Gordon came out, just not finished the deal. And definitely be a good race. It'll be tough for you that weekend because you'll probably be in Parker and back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. The King of the Hammer is all week, and I'll be out there Friday before. I think it's January 30th. Doing practice and pre-running that they allow us to do, and then I'll have to get over to Parker for the qualifying on Thursday, and then back to the King of the Hammer will be on Friday race. It's Friday there, so after that's over, we'll get back to Parker and be ready for the race over there. So hopefully the King of the Hammer only takes me about 8 or 9 hours to finish the whole event, but I know I'll be pretty tired, but it is what it is, and I love doing it.
Now remember, we got to throw San Felipe in there too. That's like 2 days before you're talking, the 30th.
Yeah. San Felipe's...
so 28th, 29th?
Yeah, I think it's 2 weeks before. But we'll be down there pre-running, for a week before the race and getting all that done. And luckily, I've got a good support crew, that takes care of my trophy truck and the short course trucks, and the rock crawler Larry McRae's guy takes care of all that, and Steve Olgis's guy takes care of all the. Mark Newham takes care of everything with the Best in Desert truck. So I can get a lot done. Just as long as I can make it to all the events, it'll enable me to do them all.
All right, next year, 2015, back to Pro 2, Pro 4 Lucas.
Yeah, we're going to be doing Pro 2, Pro 4 again in the Lucas Oil Series. Here in December, we'll be doing more testing with both the short course trucks, trying to get them even faster and more reliable than they are already. I'm excited. The Lucas Oil Series, it's more competitive than ever. We got people moving around in classes, maybe some new people coming in, and it's always exciting, to be part of that. The season starts off in March at Lake Elsinore, and goes 8 rounds throughout the year. And I hear we might make a appearance down in Ensenada, so we'll see about that one.
Wow, that'd be different.
Yeah, it'd be good. Obviously Mexico, as you know, George, we're down there. The spectators in Baja are second to none, and they come out from everywhere. It's an amazing thing, to me, starting the Baja 1000, and every year that I start the Baja 1000 or Baja 500, going up the wash,
it's crazy.
I'm like talking to my co-rider. I go, can you believe how many people out here are watching? And I had a new co-rider that's never raced in Baja before, David Maurice, who works at Rancho Drivetrain and builds my transmissions. He rode with me for the first time in Baja, and I said, the difference really, my analogy of that is the difference between racing in the States and racing in Mexico. It's like now you're in a video game with all the things that happen in Baja, the spectators, being so close to the track, having dogs run out in front of you, spectators on the track, ranchers on the track, things like that. But it's really one of the reasons why I love Baja so much. It's all the elements and the feeling of conquering Baja and escaping all the scenarios that can happen to you.
Yeah, I had an in-car we played a couple weeks ago from Justin Davis's truck, but incredible going through that wash. I mean, people 10 feet from, all you had to go one direction the wrong way, you're going to run over somebody.
Yeah, they're huge fanatics down there in Baja. It's second to none. I mean, they want to touch the cars. They want to go by. They want a souvenir. They build, people call them booby traps, and most of the time, what they want to see is they want to see the truck perform.
Right.
They want to see it jump, and sometimes it does get a little bit out of control. The biggest thing in Baja for me lately has been, the spectators really standing too close to the track and on outside of corners, and I keep seeing it over and over again, whether it's in the our series or other series that are down the race in Baja. I've done PSAs for people in Mexico, for them to use and put on videos to try to get the general public to understand, please, you got to stand back. Please stand back if you see people standing too close. But that's the one of the things that disappoints me about the spectators and fans, is how close they do stand to the track. I know that they love it and they want to see it and they want to feel it just like we do, but they got to stand back further.
In the long run, the qualifying that we had here in Vegas, I know it was great for you because you were here, plus SEMA is great for you. And we talked about that before, where you thought it was a great deal. I think it is. I mean, there were some great great people looking at a lot of the trophy trucks there. But in the end, was it made it better so that when we all showed up down there that week, you didn't have to worry about qualifying?
Yeah, I liked that part of it. You know, when we do go to Mexico and qualify, it's easier on everybody. You know, takes less time. But also when you're in Mexico, if you do wad it up in qualifying, it's really difficult to fix it.
Right.
On the other hand, we qualified early. We came to the SEMA show, which, you know, I really appreciate that. You know, the SEMA show is something that I've gone to. It's been a tool that I've used over my career to help secure sponsors or get new ones or to get my name out there. And the opportunity that Roger brought with bringing all the SCORE trophy trucks up here, you know, gave us the opportunity to get in front of the masses again, the off-road industry. You know, we haven't had a lot of the manufacturers like Ford, Chevy, Dodge, Toyota involved in this sport for quite some time. And, you know, a lot of the people that knew from those entities that knew about off-road racing are gone, retired, and it hasn't been passed down to the new people that are in those companies. And I felt that this is an opportunity to get back in front of those people and, you know, have them come out and look at a trophy truck and realize, oh my, you know, these are incredible vehicles, and you know, maybe spark interest again in the manufacturers and other companies to get them involved in our sport more. You know, sport's really kind of been doing the same thing for a lot of years, and you know, if there's any opportunity of getting more, you know, support, more sponsorship from outside, you know, going to the SEMA show is definitely a good choice. I know it was difficult for a lot of people having to tow their cars up here, and you know, for the most part, a lot of the people I talked to about after qualifying, the actual race course, you know, we raced on the short course track. We went on a asphalt oval. We did part of a road course. We had gravel. It was at night, and
it was kind of
you know, a lot of
mixture.
people loved it. You know, really. You know, in the end, after I did my qualifying loop, I said, you know what, that was really fun. And a few of the other people, I heard the same thing, that they really enjoyed it. So, you know, I hope it continues on. You know, one thing, and I know it's going to change. You know, I looked at the schedule. The SEMA show and the Baja 1000 in 2015 are actually 2 weeks apart,
Right.
Which that'll help us too. You know, I wasn't able to spend too much time at the SEMA show this year because I wanted to go win the Baja 1000. So when I was walking the floor of SEMA show, I was telling myself, I need to be in Baja right now pre-running. So, you know, I got the heck out of here and got down there pre-running. So I'd like, you know, to see, I'm happy to see that there's more time next year in between the qualifying and the SEMA show. And, you know, I encourage all the people to get out there, walk the streets, introduce yourself, hand out business cards, and, you know, let's try to get more, you know, more people in the off-road industry involved in what we're doing.
I know SEMA show people were very impressed with the whole deal, and they can't wait to have us come back. So
Yeah.
I know it was pretty good. But we want to thank you for coming on Dirt Live, Rob. I know you're a busy guy. What's up for tomorrow? I mean, you're so busy.
You know, it's really, I'm on the phone almost all day, every day, whether it's with my guys on my team, you know, or lately it's been with Larry McRae and the Poison Spire crew, just planning for next year. You know, Amber and I, you know, we take care of all the business and running the ship, and you know, we're also going to Frozen Rush, and we've been doing that stuff lately, getting the plane tickets and
Wow.
you know, the rental cars and just making all the plans. And you know, we've got a lot of work to do, and we're trying to manage the off-road racing with the family and the kids and everything, and soccer practice and going out riding, trying to do vacations.
Right.
But you know, we're getting it done, and you know, can't wait. I can't wait to get to the summer because that's really slower time of year.
Yeah.
This time of year
Get
is
a little
very,
time.
very busy, and just making sure we're all lined up for next year.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for joining us. Once again, thanks.
Thank you.
Rob MacCachren. We're going to go to